Ladies, gentlemen, and dragons of all ages, when it comes to bow as a weapon, there's a lot of fun bonus attacks that are outside of the sort of standard gameplay loop for the weapon. One of these attacks that has been around since Monster Hunter World is Dragon Piercer, which was originally a bit of a meme to focus on around as a full playstyle, but became pretty meta in the first few weeks of Monster Hunter Wilds, only to then end up getting nerfed in Title Update 1, and thanks to some data mining that was done by other players, we found out exactly what they did to nerf it, and it's actually pretty substantial. Previously, the first 8 hits of Dragon Piercer would do normal damage, and then it would very quickly drop off a cliff and do less and less the more ticks that you got. Now, only the first 2 hits do full damage, then it goes down to about 75% damage for the next 8 ticks, and then it continues to drop off that same cliff. So it's more of a gradual curve now than it used to be, but this just means that overall, the damage that you'll get from Dragon Piercer will be significantly lower, and in most situations, it'll probably be about 20%, maybe even 30% difference depending on the monster part that you're trying to pierce through. That said, there is also another one of these sort of crazy moves that doesn't get often used in the bow, which is Thousand Dragons, and this was added in Iceborne. It fires a close-range spread shot of arrows after a bit of a wind-up. This was originally brought into Iceborne to be a way of using slinger ammo as part of the moveset as a clutch claw attack, and the attack actually changed based on the slinger ammo that you had. But it's been brought back in Wilds without any slinger ammo interactions, and it's just a pure blast of damage when you use it now. This attack got buffed by around 30 to 40% in Title Update 1, which made it way stronger than it was in the base game, and combined with the Dragon Piercer nerfs, it has sort of opened a gate for a new meme playstyle to take hold for the bow. And while I'm not going to say that this is quite as strong as a meta playstyle or a meta set for the bow, today our focus is entirely on Thousand Dragons, making the most out of it because I think it's a cool ability, using it as much as possible and getting as much damage out of Thousand Dragons as we can to try and justify a playstyle that only uses this attack, because the way that it works in Wilds, it's actually relatively easy to spam use this on repeat, with the only real cost being stamina and the animation time itself, both of which there are ways to actually work around. As far as how effective this actually is, logistically for the most part, you're just using a particularly optimized set for using bow with raw attack and affinity as the damage focus, which means that you could just play the more standardized way of bow in this setup, just doing dodge and shoot over and over, and then maybe pull out like 1,000 dragons occasionally against a down monster or something like that. But I like funky playstyles. I like sticking to themes, so I will be trying to get every bit of damage possible through Thousand Dragons itself, with the only other attack that I purposefully use being the air jump after the evade, just to get better angles and reposition for better Thousand Dragons. This makes it a very coding favorable playstyle, as you spend very little coding. You generate more coding than you spend, even without having good discerning dodge success rate because of the actual ticks that you get from Thousand Dragons, and this playstyle functions best at ultra close range to the monster. This works quite well in multiplayer as well, as you can easily target weaker parts of the monster when they are attacking a different player, so I quite like it for multiplayer especially. But thanks to discerning dodge, you can play this way solo too if you'd like to, and it's quite a bit of fun. We'll also go over another variation of the setup later on that uses critical draw as a funky way to make it fit the playstyle a bit more uniquely than you could with other ways of playing bow, but I think the strongest version of focusing on Thousand Dragons is quite simply to just make a really strong standard offensive build and then play it in a way where you purposefully only use Thousand Dragons as your main damage, rather than it requiring the funky build to justify using the attack in general. With all of your buffs running then against the training dummy, you can hit over 1,000 per shot, which is actually quite solid considering how spammable this attack is now. And the fun thing is, as a result of this, if you are someone who really enjoys Dragon Piercer to the point where you want to use it even now after it's been nerfed, you can use the exact same set to make it happen. The only real difference is changing which attacks you would use on the hunts themselves, so the build stays the same. And so while I'm presenting this as a Thousand Dragons build, it works perfectly equally as a Dragon Piercer build, just an all-around dragon build, but not like Dragon Element, just dragons in the attack names. Yeah, that's getting a bit confusing. For the weapon then, we want the highest possible raw attack output, which comes from the Guardian de Shagama bow, which has 250 attack, negative 15% affinity, and a useful inherent skill on the weapon, which is special ammo boost. Then it has a 3-slot slot, a 3 slot, and a 1 slot for the decoration sockets, and close range coating as an option, which is the strongest coating for bow, giving you a 40% damage increase compared to not using a coating at all, which is more than an increase than you would get from power coating as an example. But this requires you being very close range, which you'll want to do anyways for Thousand Dragons regardless, as it is a spread shot mechanic with very limited range, meaning the closer you are to the monster and the part of the monster you're trying to hit, the more consistently you will get all of the 6 hits that you can get from this, and make all of them hit a proper weak spot on the monster as well. There is one slight exception to this, which is that for particularly long monsters with thick, meaty weak spots that are at least a little bit weak to water, Pierce Coating makes Thousand Dragons a pierce attack instead of just a spread shot, which completely changes how the damage works and makes it far better for applying element damage specifically. The maximum hits that you will get without Pierce Coating is 6. The maximum that I've seen with Pierce Coating is over 20, but of course each hit is much lower damage each, and it depends on the hit zone, the monster, all that, blah, yada yada. But basically, if you want to specialize this even further, you could also have the duna bow as a backup for fighting something like new Udra specifically, which is very big, very long, very pierceable, and weak to water. Or you can make the ice element artian bow with full attack rolls, which you could then use Pierce Coating with and Thousand Dragons against ice weak larger monsters. Of course, there aren't any really crazy good current examples, as the largest ice weak monster is probably like Ray Dow, which isn't a fantastic piercing target, at least as far as Thousand Dragons pierce. So this is much more of a niche mention that, hey, Pierce Coating does work with Thousand Dragons and is funky, and you can use the Duna bow for this for pretty good offense, but in 99% of situations doing this, you would just be worse off than using the Guardian Deshagama bow with the close range coating, which just hits a lot more consistently. As for the armor then, for the main set, we are functioning very similarly to other weapons meta builds. We could use 4 set gore magala set bonus, but because we can't use maximum might with bow reliably at all, our affinity becomes low enough that it's just worth more to get only 2 set gore, and then just use skill efficient armor pieces to get more offensive skills in general. That said, the actual pieces in this are the Zoshia beta helmet, the Zoshia alpha chest, the Guardian arkveld beta gloves, and then the gore magala beta waist and legs. This gets us the gore magala 2-set bonus, which activates Frenzy whenever we are near a large monster, and between the natural gains from clearing Frenzy and the antivirus skill that we have as well, you gain 25% affinity after you clear Frenzy, which is for the majority of combat generally speaking, so very, very high value. We also get Zoshia 2-set bonus, which is just a super slowly ticking super recovery effect, permanent health regen, just very small amounts of it. We then use the Exploiter Charm for 2 ranks of the Weakness Exploit skill, which gives us bonus affinity when hitting weak spots and even more bonus affinity when hitting wounds. Then for the mantle, I've gone with the Evasion Mantle. Bow's Discerning Dodge is more than good enough to make Rocksteady just feel like a waste. You don't really need this, and the 20% attack boost that you get with Evasion Mantle after a well-timed dodge is worth more overall to us than the stat boost from the Corrupted Mantle anyways. As well, your goal is to Discerning Dodge as often as you can regardless, which means Evasion Mantle is a very natural synergy to begin with. As for the decorations, starting with the weapon itself, we've got Piercing Shots for a 5% damage to any piercing attacks, and it includes Dragon Piercer, and interestingly, it also includes Thousand Dragons. Even though Thousand Dragons in its base form doesn't really pierce, it only does that with Pierce Coating as mentioned earlier. Either way, 5% damage gain is 5% damage gain. I have checked that this does properly work with the attack, so we won't complain. That's a solid use of a decoration. We then have a critical 3 jewel for 3 ranks of the critical boost skill. This increases our critical damage modifier from 25% bonus to 34%, and we focus on getting high affinity with the rest of our set, at least, as much as we can, which makes it a pretty hefty damage bonus as well. We then have 1 True Shot Jewel for special ammo boost, which increases the damage of Thousand Dragons as well, and this pairs with the 1 rank that you get naturally on the weapon to max out that skill as well, which is lovely. Moving on to the decorations in our armor itself, we have 1 Tenderizer Jewel to finish off Weakness Exploit to maximum ranks of this skill. Then we have 2 Counter Jewels to put Counter Strike up to 3 ranks. This gives you plus 25 raw attack for 45 seconds after triggering this skill, which happens when you are hit by an attack that knocks you down. For bow, you can also trigger Counter Strike with Discerning Dodge, which is your perfect time dodge. Specifically, you can only do this on multi-hit attacks from a monster, where you can trigger Discerning Dodge on 1 tick of the damage, then when the next part of the attack collides with you following that, you will remain unable to be hit, but still trigger the counter-strike effect. This is a pretty specific circumstance. It won't happen very often except for certain monsters, so I wouldn't count it as happening commonly, but that combined with the fact that you likely will get hit occasionally, as happens to any hunter, and that will trigger the skill naturally. So we aren't expecting this to always be active, but it is a strong enough bonus with enough opportunities to activate that it is still worth including, especially in this setup. We then also have 2 sane jewels for 2 ranks of the antivirus skill, which I mentioned earlier, to give us more affinity after clearing frenzy and make frenzy easier to clear to begin with. We've got 1 challenger jewel for a rank of the agitator skill as well, getting us up to 4 ranks of agitator in total, which gives us extra attack and affinity against an enraged monster. We then have 1 counter attack jewel for 1 rank of the adrenaline rush skill, just the first rank, but this is pretty much mandatory for any weapon with inbuilt evasion synergy, and Bow's discerning dodge is probably the best evasion synergy in the game, with the only other real competitor being dual blades, so we can keep extremely consistent uptime on adrenaline rush, and the first rank of it is worth more than any other individual rank of the skill. Then we have 5 1-slot sockets remaining for you to play around with in the armor based on your preferences. We have 2 constitution base from the actual armor pieces, which reduces the stamina cost both of dodging and the large stamina cost of using Thousand Dragons itself, which does cost a big chunk of stamina. You ideally want the equivalent of 5 ranks of constitution by the actual end of your setup, either by putting more constitution in these 1-slot sockets like I have here, or by eating specifically for the black belt meal skill. Black belt low is the equivalent of 2 constitution, black belt high is the equivalent of 3 constitution. You can't go past 5 maximum equivalent ranks of constitution, so either eat for one of those food skills or put some in your slots, but don't do both of them. That would be a waste. Otherwise, mostly just standard 1-slot fillers for the rest of this, utility and comfort as you please. With that, our full list of skills for this build is 3 critical boost, 2 ballistics for more preferable critical distance. This doesn't really help Thousand Dragons much though, as you want to be pressed right up against the monster either way, as if you're even a few feet away, it just won't hit. Then we have 2 special ammo boost, we have piercing shots, we have 5 weakness exploit, we have 5 constitution within my decoration setup at least, 4 agitator, 3 counter strike, 3 antivirus, 2 recovery up from the rest of my decoration choices, 1 adrenaline rush, 1 recovery speed, 1 flinch free, and then gore magala 2-set bonus and the Zoshia 2-set bonus as well. For the math on all of this, the bow has 250 attack as a base. We gain 10 from adrenaline rush, which can easily be kept at 100% uptime in proper combat if you are playing well. Then for Counter-Strike, I'm going to count this around 60% uptime in this setup, as that would... as that's basically what would happen if you got hit by the monster once every 75 seconds during a hunt, if triggered that way. But again, we can technically activate it more frequently with stuff like discerning dodge against certain attacks, so that does help even it out at least a little bit. At 60% uptime, that makes this count as 15 bonus raw on average. For agitator, we are counting the monster as being enraged for 70% of the hunt. You get 16 attack when 4 agitator is active. 70% uptime on that would be 11.2 for our general average attack increase from the skill, putting us at 286.2 attack. Then we have our affinity calculations. Negative 15% on the weapon gives us a bit of a ditch to dig out of. 5 weakness exploit is 30% affinity against weak spots on the monster, and an extra 20% against wounds, which also count as weak spots. Wounds are not consistent, however, so we are only counting the 30% as being a constant consideration. Then we have 25% affinity from antivirus combined with frenzy being cleared from the gore magala 2-set bonus. Then we have 10% affinity when agitator 4 is active. Again, we are treating this as 70% uptime, so an average of 7% affinity increase. This gives us a total average affinity of 47%. In our setup, we have 3 critical boost, which means our damage bonus on critical hits is increased from 25% to 34%. A 47% chance of activating a 34% damage bonus is an overall average increase of 15.98%. 286.2 times 1.1598 is 331.94. Increase this by a further 5% for the piercing shots bonus damage, up to 348.53. Increase by another 10% for 2 ranks of special ammo boost, up to 383.39. Then the big one for bow, close range coating, is a 40% damage increase over no coating at all, so increasing this number by 40%, we get our final effective raw of 536.86 6.74 when using 1000 Dragons specifically. At 47% affinity average, this set will have pretty wild damage fluctuations between hunts and even between shots. However, averages are averages, but some hunts you will get super lucky and hit most of your crits. Some hunts you will have the opposite effect. It's just sort of the nature of a middle crit build. On that note, however, our alternative variation today is a crit draw 1000 Dragons build setup. You can draw into 1000 Dragons as an attack and make it count as a draw attack, which is a lovely synergy with critical draw. This makes your draw attack and anything for 2 seconds later have significantly increased affinity up to 100% on full 3 ranks. Knowing this, I did originally make this version of the set first because I found that to be a fun synergy, but after playing around with a 1000 Dragons focused playstyle, I just find it way more comfortable and consistent generally to do it without crit draw. The reasoning being that after 1000 Dragons, you cannot just sheathe flatly for multiple seconds. You need to dodge to cancel the recovery animation and then you can sheathe, but it is still relatively long to do even that. If you are not trying to sheathe between shots, you can just use 1000 Dragons, then dodge, then use 1000 Dragons, then dodge, and use 1000 Dragons over and over and over, but this is also shown against a training dummy. In a realistic hunt with a moving monster performing attacks, you won't be able to keep that up consistently, you won't be able to have that kind of uptime outside of like traps or knockdowns specifically, but of course, it still matters. It makes a big difference to the way that the build feels. That said, critical draw is a totally viable build style for this attack, and I think it's probably worse than the main setup overall, but provides a different way of playing that makes it far more unique, makes it far more bursty, and especially it changes our preference for armor skills by having most of our affinity come from a weapon skill. All that said, here is our crit draw version of the set: Zoshia beta helmet, chest, waist, and legs as well, and then the Duna alpha arms. This gets the Zoshia 4-set bonus, which is lovely for our skill setup in general, as we have 4 peak performance within the setup too, peak performance being bonus attack when you are at full health. The Zoshia set bonus helps keep us at full health, even through smaller incoming hits without having to manually heal. We then have the counterattack charm as well for 2 ranks of the adrenaline rush skill to help us reach the cap of that skill, and then we take the evasion mantle once again. For the decorations in the weapon, we have critical draw 3 for 100% affinity gained on draw attacks and the immediate follow-ups, critical 3 for crit boost 3 once again, and the true shot jewel for that second rank of special ammo boost. In the armor slots, we have 3 counterattack jewels for 3 ranks of adrenaline rush, as we can keep full uptime on this with bow in general, though it's worth mentioning you do have to go at least a little bit out of your way to purposefully dodge through attacks with the crit draw version of the setup, but it's absolutely worth it for the bonus that it gives. We take 2 counter jewels as well to put counter strike up to 3 ranks within the set, 2 physique jewels to get 2 ranks of constitution, which when mixed with black belt high food skill gets you the equivalent of 5 ranks. Then we have 2 flawless jewels as well for 2 ranks of the peak performance skill, which I mentioned earlier. So in total, this set has 3 critical boost, 3 critical draw, 2 ballistics, 2 special ammo boost, 5 adrenaline rush, 5 agitator, which while active puts us perfectly at 100% affinity, by the way, 4 peak performance, 3 counter strike, 2 constitution, 2 recovery speed, 1 coalescence, 1 elemental absorption, 1 quick sheath, which does minorly help as we are treating it as a draw attack build, and then Zoshia 4-set bonus and the Ward of Wyveria group skill for some extra defenses on the Wyveria map. As for the math for this crit draw version of the build, 250 attack on the bow itself, 25 attack from 5 adrenaline rush full uptime, 15 attack from counter strike on 60% uptime as counted before, 20 attack from 5 agitator down to 14 when accounting for 70% uptime, plus 15 for peak performance 4, which should have impeccable uptime when you have discerning dodge and super recovery 4-set together, and this leaves us at 319 attack. For affinity, we have 15% negative on the weapon itself, then we get 100% from critical draw level 3, then we get 15% from agitator level 5 when the monster is enraged, which means that we hit perfectly 100% when they are enraged, accounting for 70% uptime on agitator average. This puts us at 95.5% average affinity. We have 3 critical boost, which increases the damage bonus of a critical hit from 25% up to 34%. A 95.5% chance at a 34% damage increase is an average increase to our damage of 32.47%. 319 times 1.3247 is 422.58. Increase that by 10% for 2 special ammo boost up to 464.84. Then the big increase here is close range coating for a 40% boost up to 650.77 effective raw total. This is around an 18% difference between the two sets, and the numbers say that the crit draw version is much stronger, but this is an example of something looking extremely good on paper but not factoring in the quirks of actual proper hunting. The main reason this looks so much better in the math is crit consistency, but it's also just not factoring in the big difference in comfort between crit draw and not crit draw for Thousand Dragons, the higher frequency that you can get the attack off if you are not worrying about sheathing your weapon constantly. Overall, the non-crit draw build gets quicker kill times on average, but the crit draw version has its own quirks and fun, as it's essentially built around getting more damage for hitting less frequently. The greatsword setup of bows, essentially, and given this is a meme playstyle to begin with, compared to like standard bow gameplay, I thought it would be fun to give both of these options that I've played with and messed around with so far. As for how to play like this then, again the first set at least is just a standard raw attack focused bow set, but if you want to stick to Thousand Dragons thematically like I am just for fun, my main recommendations are to always look up the monster part weaknesses before a hunt, find the part most weak to ranged ammo as a damage type, and then do your best to absolutely hug that part of the monster during the fight. Use Thousand Dragons at point blank range on that body part whenever you can, otherwise just dodge attacks with good timing to regenerate stamina and fill the coating gauge, and use the rest of your kit just for repositioning more than anything else to get close to that weak body part once again so that you can use Thousand Dragons. For critical draw, the fastest loop for using it is to do Thousand Dragons, then dodge, then sheath your weapon, then trying to find another opportunity to repeat that loop. Otherwise, it follows the same general logic as the main playstyle. That just about does it for today then everyone. Thousand Dragons focused bow builds shown two different ways, and a reminder that the first build is exactly equally optimized for Dragon Piercer as well, if you really prefer that attack, even after the nerfs. But with the shifts that have happened in Title Update 1, I really wanted to have a proper go at making Thousand Dragons its own full proper playstyle. I hope you've all enjoyed this then, and hopefully you enjoy using this build too if you try it out for yourself. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.